Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, British farmers will be protected in the event of a no-deal Brexit, according to the Environment Secretary, Michael Gove. He told the National Farmers Union that the government would apply tariffs on some food imports in order to help sensitive sections of British agriculture. But there are fears that farmers will be left at a competitive disadvantage if the UK leaves the EU without a deal, as Jane Dodge reports.
Newborn lambs in Gloucestershire, just a few hours old. But will anyone buy them? A no-deal Brexit will mean high tariffs on lamb exports. 40% of Henry Dunn's sheep are exported, most of them to the EU. He says the current uncertainty about Brexit is deeply worrying.
We're going to sell these lambs in approximately 12 weeks' time. We haven't got a clue what they're going to be worth this year. If we go on a no-deal Brexit, we could be on a tariff into Europe. What is this lamb going to be worth?
Do you fear, ultimately, for the future of sheep farming because of Brexit?
Brexit could be a nail in the coffin for a lot of people. If we have a very tough year this year, on the back of a tough year last year, people will say, enough is enough.
I make no apology for saying that leaving the EU without a deal would be a catastrophe for British farming.
Make farming's voice heard.
50-odd miles away in Birmingham, the president of the National Farmers Union was rapping the government's knuckles, and the Environment Secretaries in particular. Minette Batters warned a no-deal Brexit was the stuff of nightmares.
With 900 hours to go, it's unacceptable for government to leave British businesses having to take this gamble. On March the 29th, you will be the first Secretary of State in over 40 years with the responsibility, the duty of ensuring Britain is fed.
Michael Gove responded with a few crumbs of comfort, promising an announcement on import tariffs in the event of a no-deal.
I can't preempt the announcement that should be made later this week, but one thing I can reassure you is that it will not be the case that we will have zero-rate tariffs on food products. There will be protections for sensitive sections of agriculture and food production.
For sensitive sections, read livestock, milk and cheese. No mention of protective tariffs for cereal producers, though.
We've heard Mr Gove's kind words for a long while now. What we need to see is this written down in black and white. We need it in the agricultural bill or the trade bill. And until we see it in either of those documents, we're not going to believe that he is going to deliver on the import standards that match our internal UK standards.
Import tariffs on products like beef aren't popular with some of Mr Gove's fellow Brexiteers. They want a light touch, arguing competition will bring down the price of food. But farmers are worried that could bring down standards too.
The imports of beef could rise significantly. We could end up with a lot of cheaper beef coming in, not to our standards, not killed to our standards, not grown to our standards and not fed to our standards.
These are the first newborns. Lambing has only just started. It'll continue well beyond the 29th of March. And for Henry Dunn, talk of protective tariffs is too little, too late.
Now, Brexiteers and some Remainers are fearing tonight that their proposed plan, the Malthouse Compromise, for leaving the EU has been dumped by the government. The Prime Minister has been updating both Cabinet Ministers and MPs today after the Brexit Secretary Stephen Barclay held talks in Brussels last night with his counterpart Michel Barnier. Mrs May is due to head there herself tomorrow for talks. Meanwhile, the Foreign Secretary Jeremy Hunt is in Copenhagen as part of his tour of European capitals to find a way through the deadlock. Our political editor Gary Gibbon is there. What's happened?
Well, what's happened is that the Malthouse Compromise has been pretty much ruled out by the EU as something that will work its way into the withdrawal agreement. And Michel Barnier spelt that out pretty much to Steve Barclay when they met yesterday in Brussels. and it set a few hairs racing, because when Theresa May lost the vote on her deal by 230, one of the things she did in a bit of a panic maybe was to turn around and say, yeah, no, we'll look into that, we'll look into all sorts of things, and I'll seriously rethink that agreement, which was just so convincingly defeated. So as you can imagine, some of the people who like that compromise are a bit concerned, and here is Steve Barclay, the Brexit Secretary, trying to reassure them.
What we secured with the European team yesterday is that we will work on those alternative arrangements together. We will commit significant resource building on the proposals that were put forward by UK parliamentarians, and in doing so address the need for the backstop, which is what we want to avoid. So we will use the alternative arrangements work stream to make that progress in the coming months.
Well, if you understood that, you, I think, possibly weren't listening carefully enough. It wasn't intended to illuminate. This is the Brexit Secretary trying, I think, to obfuscate the fact that what the EU has said is that option, the Malthouse Compromise, will not be part of the legally binding treaty, but it could be discussed. It could have some role to play, perhaps in the future relationship document, which is not legally binding. So where are we? What is it that Theresa May will be discussing when she goes to see Jean-Claude Juncker in Brussels tomorrow? Well, when you tear it all the way, all the things she's said since that defeat about a massive rethink and all the rest of it, it does look an awful lot as though we've gone back to what she was probably going to do in December if she'd had the vote then, lost by, as some in number 10 thought, around about 30. She was going to get some legal guarantees from the EU that the backstop, when it says it's temporary, really is temporary. The new addition is that she now has the Attorney General, Geoffrey Cox, who she hopes is going to give a sort of Brexiteer's kite mark to that legal document, if and when it's drafted. And tomorrow night, I think, when Jean-Claude Juncker and Theresa May meet, is all about them trying to get that stream of work connected. There's been work going on both sides of the channel. Tomorrow night, it might properly connect and start in earnest.
Thanks, Gary. Well, in Westminster now is the Conservative Brexiteer MP Andrew Bridgen. Where does this leave you? If the compromise is dead and we're back to this idea of legal assurances to the withdrawal agreement and the backstop, where are you on that?
Well, we haven't had it confirmed yet, Kishnan, that the Malthouse proposals are dumped. I can tell you that Jacob Rees-Mogg and Steve Baker are currently meeting as we speak in number 10 with the Prime Minister, and I expect to know very shortly the outcome of that meeting.
Well, if it is, as reported, as Gary Gibbons just suggested, what then?
Well, it would be deeply disappointing. The Malthouse Compromise was a huge compromise for Brexiteers, but we realised it's something which would have united the vast majority of the Conservative Party and was a meaningful proposal which we could accept to replace the backstop. It would be very disappointing.
So does this means that, as far as you're concerned, that the deal, which isn't a deal, the withdrawal agreement, you would vote it down if it's put back to you in the next couple of weeks?
Well, I think the problem is that if the Malthouse Compromise is dropped, then Brexiteers will look at other things that are wrong with the withdrawal agreement. The payment of the £39 billion up front with no guarantees, and also huge now concerns around the transition period where because we'll have given powers over our state aid rules to the European Union, we could be completely open for 2 years, perhaps a longer period, where the European Union would be able to entice businesses with state aid, effectively our money, to relocate into the EU, and there's absolutely nothing the government here could do about it.
With that giant muppet. But, so what would happen if Geoffrey Cox, who is a Brexiteer like you, assures you that he believes it is now a legally binding letter, codicil, document, whatever it is, that means your concerns over the backstop being permanent are assuaged? Is that enough if Geoffrey Cox tells you
No,
it?
because that would go exactly against the advice that he gave to the Prime Minister on the same withdrawal agreement and the backstop.
But if he's had different advice that now tells him he's changed his mind and it is legally binding, that's not good enough.
Well, the fact is that everybody knows that unless the treaty was reopened and actually changed. It isn't legally binding. I think we're talking about a legal codicil to go alongside the agreement. That is not legally binding.
So the deal is dead, isn't it? I mean, if all is as expected, we're looking, from your perspective, at no deal.
I think if the Prime Minister comes back to the House next week with a potentially unchanged withdrawal agreement, when the Brady Amendment she was authorised to replace the backstop, not come back with a piece of paper with a different legal opinion from the same lawyer who said that we could get stuck in the backstop indefinitely only a few weeks ago.
Right.
So, I mean, I think MPs who voted overwhelmingly against the withdrawal agreement, to change your view of the withdrawal agreement on that basis, I think would be looked on with a certain scepticism by our electorate.
I know this is a hypothetical, but as you know, Yvette Cooper's going to put an amendment to Parliament that tries to force the government to seek a delay and to take no deal off the table on March the 29th. Well, if that succeeds, you are then left with the choice of the deal or no deal. Sorry, the deal or no Brexit on March the 29th.
Well,
which is it?
Let's be clear. Anyone who wants to take no deal off the table doesn't really want us to leave the European Union or have never negotiated anything. There's only the threat of no deal, the walkaway position, that is getting the EU to do any sort of negotiation whatsoever. To take no deal off the table would be like locking yourself in the car showroom, telling the salesman, I can't leave until I bought a car.
You're not telling me which you'll choose. All right. While I'm with you, while you're with me, could I just ask you briefly about the breaking news tonight about Shamima Begum, this girl who went to Syria aged 15, is now 19. It appears she's having her citizenship stripped by Sajid Javid, even though, as far as we're aware, she was born in Britain. She doesn't have dual nationality, so she will be rendered stateless by this. Is it the right thing to do?
I think it's difficult when there may already be 360 individuals who've already returned. Whether this young lady is any more dangerous than any of those is probably debatable. But I think there's going to be a huge groundswell of support for this from the public. And I think basically when someone throws their support for another entity who's basically declared war on the British state, there'll be a lot of sympathy to the fact that you've probably given up the protection of your British citizenship by taking that act.
And what about the baby?
I have considerable concerns about the legal precedence of this and whether it's going to stand up. I understand the law is that you can't make someone stateless. However, this young lady made a decision. It hasn't turned out for her. Now she wants the protection of British citizenship, which the group that she's been supporting for 4 years were set against.
Andrew Bridgen, thank you very much for joining us.